Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our mini lecture series. This is week 5, module 5. In this week, we're going to be discussing compensation and pay structures. Specifically, in chapter 11, we're going to talk about 11.2 learning objective, which is to define and we'll give examples of how to conduct a job evaluation. And 11.5, which is basically explaining the difference between competency-based and traditional pay plans. So let's begin this brief lecture going right into job evaluation methods. So let's take a description of the definition of that process. And so a job evaluation method is a formal systematic comparison of jobs that determines the work of one job relative to another. And so basically the aim of this process is to determine a job's relative worth and eventually establish a wage and salary structure in our organization. So the basic principle of job evaluation is that jobs require greater qualifications, obviously, more responsibilities, and more complex job duties, and thus some jobs should receive more pay than others with lesser requirements. So that goes beyond saying, but very important to understand the basic construct here. So let's talk about several factors that go into this job evaluation process, job methods evaluation process. So we have to look at, first of all, compensable factors, which are factors that jobs have in common and can be used, for example, to establish how the jobs compare to one another. And it's important to understand the fundamental compensable element of a job, such as skills, effort, responsibility, and working conditions. So preparing for the job evaluation itself is a judgmental process and demands close cooperation among people like supervisors, HR specialists, employees, union representatives in a collective bargaining environment, for example. The main steps include identifying the need for job evaluation, a careful examination of the stakeholders and getting cooperation and buy-in from those, maybe establishing a committee, evaluation committee, and the committee then performs the evaluation or the actual evaluation. It can consist of 3 main components or functions. So one of them is identifying 10 to 15 key benchmark jobs, which to compare and contrast and look at best practices, for example. Next function is to select compensable factors, key factors, job environment, skill sets, so forth, and evaluating the worth of the particular job. Next in the process is job evaluation methods, which is simply maybe ranking. The simplest job evaluation method ranks jobs relative to all other jobs, and it's usually based on some overall factor like job difficulty. And there are several steps in the job ranking process or method. Obtain job information, select and group jobs, select compensable factors, rank jobs, for example, in a rating scale, maybe rank combine jobs, combine ratings, compare current pay with others, and so forth. And another important part of the process is a job classification system. And this is fairly simple. It's widely used method in which raters categorize jobs into particular groups. For example, all jobs in a particular group are roughly the same for the value of pay purposes. The groups are called classes, job classes. You've heard that term, and you will in this class, in this course. And if they contain similar jobs or grades, if they contain jobs that are similar in difficulty but otherwise different, for example, and they're also known as job grading. And then we'll look at job evaluation methods, including a point method, which involves identifying several compensable factors for the jobs, as well as various degrees to which each factor is present in each job. So now we're getting a little more detailed in the analysis of a particular factor inside one job as compared to a factor in another job. Assume there are 5 degrees of compensable factors, factor responsibilities a job can contain, for example. Assume you assign a different number of points to each degree of each compensable factor. So now we have a rating scale that things can start to be weighed. Once the evaluation committee, this determines the degree to which a compensable factor, like responsibility, for example, or effort, is present in the job, the committee can calculate its total point value and therefore add a quantitative point rating for each job. Okay, so that's briefly talking about job evaluation methods in learning outcome 11.2. Let's move to 11.5, excuse me, so that we can kind of finish off chapter 11. And this one talks about contemporary topics in compensation. So, and it's going to give you a brief oversight or overview of what competency-based pay is all about. And a definition might be that the company pays for employees' range, depth, and types of skills and knowledge, rather than for the job title he or she holds. Does that make sense? Of course, yes. Who would want to work for a place where people by their titles get paid and compensated rather than by their skills and knowledge and skills and abilities? Well, yeah, so that's a point of discussion we can have in class. Beautiful. So with more companies organizing around teams, you want to kind of encourage employees to get and to use the skills required to rotate jobs among jobs in a particular team environment. We've heard the term multitasking, but this is a version of that. So when we're talking about competency-based environments, we need to be very cognizant of how and when and for what reasons people move and change within their particular jobs. Okay, so so let's talk about competency-based pay in practice. These come, and when we talk about competency-based pay and in practice, we need to consider 5 elements. Okay, so the first element is a system where you, the employer, your employer, defines specific required skills for a particular job, chooses a method for basing the person's pay on, and it also contains a system for acquiring skills. Do we have training? Do we have a way to get people from one point in the skill set or the competency to another place so that we can adequately fit them into a category where we can provide a relative competency band, pay band, for example. And the bottom line on competency-based pay is that there are a variety of pros and cons that are discussed, as well as different implementation pitfalls that should be considered as part of this process. So, as we close this chapter 12, we can talk about comparable worth for different types of compensation purposes. That term refers to the requirement to pay men and women equal wages for jobs that are dissimilar but comparable in value. Similar, dissimilar, not the same, but comparable in value. So that's an important thing to measure. For instance, measured into points for the employer. All right, so and a case that you might be asked to review in this chapter is the Gunther Supreme Court case, which involved Washington County, Oregon prison matrons who claimed, these are women that worked in prisons as nurses, who claimed sex discrimination. Washington County finally agreed to pay 35,000 employees in female-dominated jobs almost $500 million in pay raises over 7 years to settle that suit. So a landmark case for sure, and one that you might be looking at in this course. Anyway, so that wraps up chapter 11 in week 5, module 5. Stay tuned, we'll go over chapter 12 in a few minutes. Okay, thank you.